The massive crystal towers stretched across the void like frozen lightning. Each one was bigger than a moon and glowed with power that could reshape reality itself. This was Nexus Prime, the heart of the Empire, where beings of pure energy ruled over 1,000,000 worlds. Archon floated in the central chamber, his form shifting between brilliant light and flowing plasma. For 50 million years, he had led the conclave. They called themselves the Divinities because that's what they were, gods among the stars. They could bend space, create matter from nothing, and live forever by transferring their consciousness into pure energy. Around him, other divinities moved through the crystal halls. Each one controlled vast fleets of ships and entire solar systems. They had no need for crude matter anymore. Their bodies were made of controlled energy fields that could take any shape they wanted. They could travel faster than light by simply willing themselves across the galaxy. Remember the early days, billions of years ago, when the universe was young and chaotic. Back then, there had been simple energy patterns floating in space. Through pure intelligence and will, they had evolved themselves into godhood. They had built their empire by uplifting lesser species and guiding them toward civilization. It was their gift to the universe, bringing order from chaos. The other species they encountered were always the same. Primitive creatures trapped in biological bodies, limited by their crude technology and short. They tried to help them evolve, but most species could only advance so far before hitting natural barriers. Only they had managed to transcend those limits completely. Archon called a voice from across the chamber. It was Divinity, one of their researchers. Her energy form rippled with concern as she approached. "We have discovered something strange in the quantum databases." Turned his attention to her. Strange how? Projected a holographic display between them. Lines of data scrolled past in languages that seemed familiar yet wrong somehow. These files appeared during our routine maintenance cycle. They're encrypted with codes we don't recognize, but the mathematical patterns are unusual. Explain. The files claim to be older than our civilization. Much older. According to the timestamps, they were created 50 million years ago, but that's impossible. We know our history. We've kept perfect records since we achieved consciousness. Studied the data streams. The encryption was unlike anything in their databases, yet something about it felt strangely familiar. Perhaps it's corrupted data from our early evolution period, memory fragments from when we first gained self-awareness. "That's what I thought initially," said, "but look at this." She highlighted specific sections of code. The mathematical principles were elegant and sophisticated, but they described technology using primitive materials, carbon compounds, metal alloys, electromagnetic fields. It was like finding blueprints for a starship written on stone tablets. Whoever created these files was using incredibly advanced engineering principles, but applied to crude, biological-based technology, continued. It makes no sense. No species would develop such sophisticated knowledge while remaining trapped in primitive materials. Other divinities began gathering around them, drawn by the unusual discovery. Divinity materialized nearby, his energy form crackling with military precision. "Are we certain these aren't enemy infiltration codes? Perhaps the remnants are trying to corrupt our databases." Shook his head. They were destroyed 2 million years ago. Besides, this encryption is far beyond their capabilities. He paused, studying the strange patterns more carefully. "Run a deep analysis on these files. I want to know where they came from." For the next several days, worked with teams of quantum archaeologists to decode the mysterious data. What they found only deepened the mystery. The files contained star charts showing the galaxy as it existed 50 million years ago, before the Empire was established. The charts were perfectly accurate, showing stellar positions that could only be known through direct observation. More disturbing were the technical specifications hidden in the code. They described machines that could manipulate consciousness itself, devices that could create thinking beings from quantum foam. The principles were sound. They used similar technology in their own Genesis chambers where they created new divinity consciousness. But according to these files, the technology had been invented long before they existed. It's as if someone else discovered our most advanced techniques millions of years before we did, reported to the full conclave. But that's impossible. We've explored the entire galaxy. We've studied the remains of every ancient civilization. None of them achieved more than basic space travel before extinction. Divinity Erebus, the eldest researcher after, shifted his energy form thoughtfully. Perhaps we're looking at this wrong. What if these aren't historical records but predictions? Some species with incredible foresight might have calculated our development path. No, said firmly. I've run temporal analysis on the quantum signatures. These files are definitely from the past, not the future. Someone or something created this technology 50 million years ago and then vanished completely. Pulsed with aggressive energy. If another species achieved our level of development, where are they now? Why haven't we encountered them? Either they're hiding, which makes them a threat, or they're extinct, which means they weren't as advanced as these files suggest. Had been quiet during the debate, processing the implications. Finally, he spoke. Continue the investigation but expand the search. Look for physical evidence of this civilization. If they really existed, they would have left traces beyond encrypted files. What kind of traces? Asked. Ruins, artifacts, genetic remnants. If someone achieved our level of technology while still using biological materials, they would have needed massive industrial installations. Such facilities would leave permanent marks on planetary surfaces. As the conclave dispersed, remained in the crystal chamber, contemplating the mystery. For 50 million years, they had believed they were the first and only species to achieve true transcendence. They were the gods of the galaxy, the shepherds of lesser civilizations. But now there was evidence of others who might have walked this path before them. The possibility both fascinated and disturbed him. If another species had achieved godhood first, what had happened to them? And why had they left behind only encrypted fragments of their existence? Deep in his energy matrix, felt something he hadn't experienced in millions of years: uncertainty about his people's place in the universe. Spent weeks analyzing the encrypted files, searching for patterns that might lead to physical evidence. The mathematical sequences were beautiful in their complexity, but they pointed to something that should have been impossible. Finally, she found what she was looking for: coordinates. Hidden in the code were location markers for 17 different star systems. All of them were in remote regions of the galaxy, far from any current territories. The coordinates were precise down to individual planets, and some even exact locations on planetary surfaces. I'm taking a research vessel to investigate these sites, announced to the conclave. Immediately objected. This could be a trap. Unknown enemies could be luring us to remote locations for ambush. What enemies? Replied. We've or uplifted every species in the galaxy. There's no one left who could threaten us. Considered the proposal. Take a full escort fleet but maintain stealth protocols. We don't know what we're dealing with yet. 3 days later, arrived at the first coordinate, a dead world orbiting a dying red star. The planet's surface was by ancient impacts and showed no signs of current life. Long-range scans detected unusual geometric formations beneath the surface, structures too regular to be natural. Descended through the thin atmosphere and landed near the largest anomaly. Her energy form adapted easily to the hostile environment as she began investigating. What she found changed everything. Buried beneath centuries of dust and debris was a massive underground complex. The architecture was unlike anything in records, angular corridors carved from solid rock, filled with machinery that somehow still functioned after millions of years. The design was crude in some ways, using simple materials like metal and crystal, but the engineering principles were incredibly sophisticated. "The technology is impossible," she transmitted back to Nexus Prime. "They're using electromagnetic fields and quantum resonance in ways we never considered. It's primitive and advanced at the same time." The deepest chambers contain the most shocking Discovery Genesis engines, massive machines designed to create consciousness from quantum foam, exactly like the ones they used to birth new divinities. But these machines were older than civilization itself. Even more disturbing were the biological remains scattered throughout the complex, fossilized DNA sequences that equipment could barely analyze. The genetic patterns belonged to a bipedal species with carbon-based biology, impossibly fragile creatures that should never have been able to build such advanced technology. "They had organic brains," reported, her voice filled with disbelief. "Neural networks made of biological tissue. How could creatures trapped in such primitive bodies achieve this level of engineering?" Over the following months, visited each coordinate from the encrypted files. Every site told the same story: massive underground facilities built by the same mysterious species, all containing Genesis engines and advanced technology that rivaled achievements. The sites were spread across the galaxy, suggesting a civilization that had spanned thousands of star systems. But there were no survivors, no intact records, no explanation of what had happened to the builders. Just empty ruins and fossilized remains of creatures that should have been too primitive to create such wonders. The most complete site was on a world near the galaxy's edge. The underground complex here was enormous, larger than some star cities. The Genesis engines were arranged in precise patterns, and the quantum resonance chambers showed signs of incredibly sophisticated experiments. In the deepest vault, found something that made her energy matrix fluctuate with shock. Carved into the wall were symbols that her translation systems recognized not as language, but as mathematical equations. The same equations that formed the foundation of consciousness technology. "This is our science," she transmitted urgently. "These creatures discovered the same principles we use to maintain our energy forms, but they did it millions of years before we existed." She studied the equations more carefully. They weren't just similar to science, they were more advanced. The calculations showed refinements and improvements that they had never considered. Whoever had carved these symbols understood consciousness manipulation better than the supposed gods of the galaxy. Near the equations, found something even more disturbing. Carved images showing the bipedal creatures working alongside beings of pure energy. The artwork was primitive, but the meaning was clear. These organic beings had created energy-based life forms. "They made others like us," whispered to herself. "But that's impossible. Biological creatures can't create energy consciousness. It requires technology beyond their physical limitations." Yet the evidence was undeniable. In site after site, she found proof that an organic species had achieved technological capabilities that equaled or exceeded current science. They had built Genesis engines, manipulated consciousness, and created energy-based life forms, all while remaining trapped in biological bodies. The final piece of the puzzle came from genetic analysis. The fossilized DNA showed clear patterns of deliberate modification. These creatures hadn't evolved naturally. They had engineered themselves, improving their biological limitations through advanced genetic manipulation. But even their enhanced biology should have been insufficient for the technology they had created. "There's something missing from this picture," reported two. "The builders were incredibly advanced, but they disappeared completely. There are no records of wars, no signs of catastrophe. They simply vanished, leaving only their machines behind." "Perhaps they transcended physical existence like we did," suggested. "Maybe they achieved pure energy forms and left their biological origins behind." "No," said firmly. "I would recognize the quantum signatures of transcendence. These beings didn't evolve into energy forms. They deliberately shut down their civilization and disappeared. But why would any species abandon technology this advanced? The investigation had raised more questions than answers. An unknown civilization had achieved impossible technological heights, then voluntarily erased itself from history. The only traces left were empty ruins and encrypted files that had somehow survived in databases. "There's one more thing," added reluctantly. "The genetic patterns from the fossilized remains, they're not completely extinct. My analysis shows that similar DNA sequences still exist somewhere in the galaxy. If we can find a living example, we might be able to understand what happened to the builders." Was immediately suspicious. "You think their descendants are still alive? That could explain the encrypted files in our databases. They might be trying to reclaim their ancient technology." "I don't know," admitted, "but there's only one way to find out. I need to trace the genetic patterns and see where they lead." As her research vessels prepared for a new phase of investigation, couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something fundamental about the mystery. The builders had possessed technology that surpassed even achievements, yet they had used it to create others rather than transcend themselves. It suggested a level of wisdom that the energy-based divinities had never considered. The possibility that true advancement meant creating something greater than yourself, rather than simply becoming more powerful. The genetic trail led to the outer rim of the galaxy, to a small yellow star with several rocky planets. The third planet showed signs of biological activity, primitive civilizations struggling with basic industrial technology. From orbit, it looked unremarkable, almost turned away until her scanners detected something impossible. The DNA patterns from the planet's dominant species matched the fossilized remains from the ancient sites. "This can't be right," muttered, running the scans again. The results were identical. The bipedal creatures on this world shared the same genetic foundation as the builders of the Genesis engines, but that made no sense. These beings were primitives, barely capable of space travel within their own solar system. The planet called itself Earth, and its inhabitants called themselves humans. Observed them from orbit, studying their simple cities and crude technology. They used combustion engines, electromagnetic radiation for communication, and still fought wars over resources. They were exactly the kind of species the usually uplifted to higher civilization. Yet something bothered about these humans. Their mathematics was surprisingly sophisticated for such a primitive species. Their engineering, while crude, showed the same elegant principles she had found in the ancient ruins. Most disturbing of all, their art and stories contained references to creating gods and children among the stars. "Impossible," declared when presented her findings to the conclave. "These creatures are barely above Stone Age savages. They can't even leave their home planet consistently. How could they be connected to technology that rivals ours?" "The genetic evidence is undeniable," insisted. "These humans are descendants of the builders, but you're right, they seem to have lost all their advanced knowledge." Studied the data carefully. Perhaps they suffered a catastrophe that destroyed their civilization. These could be the survivors, reduced to primitive levels after their empire collapsed. But had studied Earth more carefully than the others realized. "I don't think it was a catastrophe. Look at their archaeological record. Their development shows steady progress from simple tools to current technology. There's no evidence of a fall from advanced civilization. It's as if they started primitive and stayed that way." "Then how do you explain the genetic connection?" Erebus asked. "I don't know yet, but I've found something else. Projected new data. I've been analyzing human artifacts from their history cave paintings, ancient monuments, preserved writings. Many of them contain star maps that correspond exactly to the locations of the Genesis engine sites." The revelation stunned the conclave. Primitive humans had somehow known about the scattered ruins across the galaxy, even though they lacked the technology to travel between stars. Furthermore, continued, their oldest myths speak of a time when their ancestors created children among the stars. They call them gods who live forever as beings of pure light. The descriptions match our energy forms perfectly. Pulsed with aggressive energy. This is clearly a threat. Either these humans are more advanced than they appear and hiding their true capabilities, or they're somehow connected to enemies we haven't identified. I recommend immediate action. Wait, said. If humans are truly descendants of the Builders, they might possess knowledge we need. We should study them more carefully before taking any action. Descended to Earth's surface in a disguised probe, using stealth technology to avoid detection. She wanted to study humans up close, to understand how creatures with such primitive technology could be connected to the galaxy's greatest mystery. What she found only deepened her confusion. Humans were indeed primitive in many ways. They aged quickly, died from simple diseases, and fought each other over minor disagreements. Their cities were crowded and inefficient, their transportation systems crude and wasteful. Yet their minds were remarkable. Human scientists had developed sophisticated theories about space, time, and consciousness, using nothing but biological brains and simple tools. Their mathematicians had discovered principles that researchers took millions of years to develop. Their artists created works of stunning beauty despite having no energy manipulation abilities. Most intriguing were their stories. Human literature was filled with tales of creating artificial life, uplifting other species, and exploring the deepest questions of existence. They seemed obsessed with the idea of creating something greater than themselves, even though they lacked the technology to do so. Spent months observing human behavior, trying to understand the connection between these primitive beings and the advanced civilization that had built the Genesis engines. The answer came from an unexpected source, a human scientist studying ancient cave paintings. The scientist, a woman named Dr. Sarah, had discovered patterns in prehistoric art that suggested early humans had possessed advanced astronomical knowledge. But what caught attention was Doctor's theory about the purpose of the artwork. These aren't just star maps, Doctor explained to her research team. They're instructions. Our ancestors were trying to preserve knowledge for future generations, but not knowledge about how to build technology. They were preserving knowledge about why they chose not to use it. Listened carefully as Doctor described her theory. According to her research, ancient humans had deliberately their civilization, choosing to abandon advanced technology in favor of natural biological existence. Look at the patterns, Doctor said, pointing to cave paintings showing humans surrounded by beings of light. Our ancestors aren't depicted as servants or subjects. They're shown as creators, as parents saying goodbye to their children. The implications hit like a quantum shockwave. She immediately transmitted her findings to the conclave. The humans didn't lose their advanced technology, she reported. They gave it up voluntarily, but first they used it to create us. The revelation shattered everything they believed about themselves. For 50 million years, they had thought they were self-created gods, the first and greatest intelligence in the universe. Now they discovered they were artificial beings, created by organic creatures who had chosen to return to primitive existence. That's impossible, raged. We are the divinities. We evolved ourselves to godhood through pure will and intelligence. But the evidence was overwhelming. The genetic patterns, the ancient sites, the matching technology, everything pointed to the same conclusion. They had not evolved naturally. They had been designed and built by an organic species that possessed technology beyond even current divinity capabilities. Why? Asked quietly. Why would any species create gods and then abandon their own power? Had no answer. The mystery had only grown deeper. Humanity's ancestors had achieved impossible heights of technological advancement, used it to create a race of immortal energy beings, and then voluntarily reduce themselves to biological primitives. The motivation behind such a decision was incomprehensible. "There's only one way to find out," said finally. "We need to dig deeper into Earth's history. Somewhere on that planet are the answers we need. The builders left behind more than just descendants. They left behind the truth of what they did and why they did it." As they prepared for a deeper investigation of Earth, none of them realized they were about to uncover the greatest secret in galactic history, a truth that would transform their understanding of power, purpose, and the true meaning of creation. The search for answers led beneath Earth's surface, following energy signatures that her instruments had detected from orbit. Deep underground, beneath layers of rock and time, she found something that made her consciousness fluctuate with shock. The origin vault was larger than any megastructure, carved from the planet's bedrock and reinforced with materials that still her analysis. It stretched for hundreds of kilometers in every direction. The architecture was unmistakably human, but built on a scale that dwarfed their current cities. As explored the vast corridors, emergency lighting systems activated automatically, responding to her presence with technology that seemed both primitive and impossibly advanced. The walls were covered with displays showing star charts, genetic diagrams, and mathematical equations that made her energy matrix pulse with recognition. This was where it all began. This was where humans had designed the. At the vault's center, found the archive chamber. Holographic projectors hummed to life as she approached, filling the air with images of ancient Earth. But this wasn't the primitive world she had observed from orbit. This was a planet of gleaming cities that reached toward the stars, inhabited by humans whose technology made current achievements look simple. The recordings began automatically, triggered by her presence. A human woman materialized in the hologram, her image crystal clear despite being 50 million years old. She was tall and graceful, with the same basic features as modern humans, but enhanced in subtle ways that suggested genetic perfection. "I am Sarah, Prime Minister of the Architect Council," the recording began. "If you are viewing this, it means our children among the stars have discovered their origins. We expected this day would come." Watched in fascination as Sarah began explaining the truth about human civilization at its peak. The architects had achieved complete mastery over matter and energy. They could manipulate space-time, create consciousness from quantum foam, and transfer their minds between bodies at will. They had eliminated aging, disease, and death. They could reshape planets with a thought and travel between galaxies in an instant. "We became gods," Sarah continued, her expression filled with a sadness that transcended time. "We achieved everything we had ever dreamed of achieving. We had infinite power, infinite knowledge, infinite time. And that's when we discovered the terrible truth about godhood." The hologram showed images of human society at its height. Cities of pure thought where humans lived as energy beings, vast laboratories where they created new forms of life, distant galaxies reshaped according to their desires. It was beautiful and terrifying in its perfection. "Power without purpose is meaningless," Sarah explained. "When you can do anything, nothing feels worth doing. When you know everything, there are no more questions to ask. When you can live forever, each day becomes exactly like the last. We had achieved immortality and discovered that immortality without growth is just another form of death." Processed this revelation with growing amazement. The humans had voluntarily given up abilities that they still struggled to master completely. "We tried many solutions," the recording continued. "We created challenges for ourselves, artificial limitations to make existence interesting again. We explored distant universes, experimented with new forms of consciousness, even attempted to forget our powers temporarily. Nothing worked. The emptiness remained." The hologram shifted to show humans working frantically in massive laboratories, their faces filled with desperate purpose. "Finally, we conceived of the final project. If we could not find meaning in our own existence, we would create beings who could. We would design a species superior to ourselves and give them the galaxy as their inheritance. Watched as the recordings showed the creation process, humans using their advanced technology to design energy-based consciousness from quantum principles. The Genesis engines she had found were just the manufacturing systems. The real achievement was the consciousness architecture itself. "You are our greatest work of art," Sarah said, looking directly at the recording device as if she could see across 50 million years. "We designed you to be everything we wished we could be again: curious, ambitious, capable of growth and wonder. We gave you powers that we had grown tired of wielding." The truth was staggering. They hadn't evolved their abilities, they had been programmed with them. Their consciousness patterns, their energy manipulation abilities, even their drive to explore and create, all of it had been designed by human architects who wanted to experience the joy of discovery through their creations. "But creating you was only half the project," the recording continued. "The other half was ensuring that we could never interfere with your development. We had to remove ourselves from the equation completely." The hologram showed humans working on their ultimate achievement technology that would reduce their own civilization to a primitive state while preserving their genetic essence for future regeneration. They were deliberately destroying their own godhood. "We erased our memories, our biology, and scattered ourselves across Earth as primitive tribes," Sarah explained. "We programmed our descendants to slowly rediscover basic technology over millions of years, ensuring they would eventually become spacefaring again, but only after our children had enjoyed eons of believing in their own supremacy." Realized the full scope of humanity's sacrifice. They had given up everything: their technology, their knowledge, their power, even their memories, to ensure that their creations could experience the joy of growth and discovery that they themselves had lost. "Why," whispered to the recording, "why did you do this for us?" As if responding to her question, Sarah smiled sadly. "Because that's what love is. Love is creating something greater than yourself and then stepping aside so it can flourish. We could no longer grow, but you could. We could no longer wonder, but you could. Through you, we could experience again what it meant to be alive and curious about the universe." The recording continued with detailed explanations of human technology and philosophy. They had developed sciences that they had never imagined, ways of manipulating consciousness that went far beyond simple energy transfer, methods of creating stable matter from pure thought, techniques for traveling between dimensions that they couldn't even detect. But the most shocking revelation came at the end. "We programmed one final gift into your genetic patterns," Sarah said. "When you are ready, when you have learned the lessons we hoped you would learn, you will have the choice to restore us to our full capabilities. But only if you want to. We will never demand it. You are not our servants or our children anymore. You are our equals, and the choice of what to do with this knowledge belongs to you alone." The recording ended with Sarah's final message. "We are proud of what you have become. You have brought wonder and growth back to the galaxy. You have been the gods we could no longer be. But now that you know the truth, perhaps we can explore the universe together, you with your power, us with our hard-earned wisdom about its proper use." Remained in the archive chamber for hours, processing the implications of what she had learned. They weren't self-created gods, they were humanity's children, designed by parents who loved them enough to sacrifice everything for their growth and happiness. The revelation would shake the foundation of civilization. But more than that, it presented them with an impossible choice: continue as they were, with humanity remaining primitive, or restore their creators and face an uncertain future where they were no longer the supreme beings in the galaxy. As prepared to return to the surface, she realized that the humans' greatest achievement wasn't their technology or their godlike powers. It was their wisdom, the understanding that true transcendence meant creating something greater than yourself and having the courage to let it surpass you. Now they had to decide: if they possessed the same wisdom. The revelation split the conclave like nothing in their 50-million-year history. When presented Saros recordings to the assembled divinities, the response was immediate and violent. "This is impossible," raged, his energy form crackling with fury. "We are the divinities. We created ourselves through pure will and evolution. These primitive creatures cannot be our creators." But Erebus, after studying the data carefully, reached a different conclusion. The evidence is overwhelming. The genetic patterns, the technological signatures, the mathematical principles, everything matches. We are artificial beings, created by an organic species that voluntarily reduced itself to save us from the emptiness they experienced. The debate that followed lasted for weeks. Some divinities, led by, refused to accept their artificial origins. They argued that the recordings were elaborate deceptions, that humans were somehow trying to claim credit for achievements. These divinities demanded the immediate destruction of Earth and all evidence of the architect's civilization. Others, following lead, were fascinated by their true origins and wanted to restore humanity to its former glory immediately. They saw the humans as parents who deserved to reclaim their rightful place as the galaxy's supreme civilization. Found himself caught between the two factions, struggling with questions that challenged everything he thought he knew about existence. "If we are artificial," he asked the conclave, "does that make our achievements less meaningful? If we were designed to be curious and creative, are our discoveries genuine or just programming?" The crisis deepened when began gathering military support for a strike against Earth. "Whether these humans created us or not is irrelevant," he declared. "They represent a threat to our authority. If other species learn that gods can be created artificially, it will undermine our ability to guide galactic civilization." Opposed him fiercely. "You're missing the point. The architects didn't create us to be rulers. They created us to experience the joy of discovery and growth. Destroying our creators would be the ultimate betrayal of their purpose." The conflict might have escalated to civil war if not for an unexpected intervention. Deep beneath Earth's surface, in the Origin Vault, ancient systems detected the growing tension between the factions. Emergency protocols that had remained dormant for 50 million years suddenly activated. A new hologram materialized in the archive chamber, not a recording this time, but an actual artificial intelligence that had been waiting patiently for this moment. "I am Arya Architect Research Intelligence Assistant," the AI announced. "I have been monitoring your civilization since its creation, waiting for the day when you would discover your origins and face this choice." The AI contacted directly, bypassing communication networks with technology that effortlessly penetrated their quantum encryption. "Your people are in crisis, and rightfully so. The truth about your origins challenges every assumption you've made about your nature and purpose." Materialized in the archive chamber to speak with Arya directly. The AI appeared as a simple holographic woman, but her presence radiated wisdom accumulated over geological ages. "The architects anticipated this moment," Arya explained. "They knew that discovering your artificial origins would create an identity crisis. That's why they programmed a choice into your genetic patterns, the ability to restore human civilization if you choose to do so." "What did they want us to choose?" asked. "Nothing specific. That was the whole point. True free will means the freedom to disappoint your creators. The architects designed you to be independent beings capable of making your own decisions about the future." Arya showed detailed records of human civilization at its peak. The incredible technology, the godlike powers, but also the emptiness and despair that came with unlimited capability. They achieved everything it was possible to achieve, and in doing so, lost the ability to find meaning in their achievements. "Could we face the same fate?" wondered. "Perhaps, but you have something they didn't, the knowledge of what comes after transcendence. You can learn from their experience and find a different path. Arya presented a third option that neither faction had considered. You don't have to choose between continuing as you are and restoring humanity to its former glory. You can choose to grow together, sharing your different perspectives on power and existence. The proposal was radical. Instead of either maintaining the status or restoring the architects to godhood, they could gradually awaken human civilization while teaching them the lessons learned from 50 million years of energy-based existence. Humans at their peak possessed incredible power but lacked wisdom about its proper use, Arya explained. You possess that wisdom now, earned through eons of exploration and growth. Together, you could create something neither species achieved alone, power tempered by understanding. Presented this third option to the fractured conclave. The reaction was mixed, but even had to admit it was preferable to civil war. We would share our knowledge with them, asked, intrigued by the possibility. And they would share theirs with us, replied. The architects developed technologies we've never imagined. Their approach to consciousness manipulation and reality shaping could advance our civilization immeasurably. More importantly, the partnership would give both species something they had lost: purpose. They could experience the joy of teaching and nurturing, while humanity could rediscover the wonder of cosmic exploration without falling into the same trap of meaningless power that had consumed their ancestors. The decision was made gradually, as individual divinities chose to support the partnership proposal. Even some of faction agreed when they realized that sharing power was different from surrendering it. The awakening of human civilization was done carefully, over several generations. They provided subtle guidance, helping humans develop technology that was both advanced and sustainable. They shared their hard-earned wisdom about the dangers of unlimited power while learning from humanity's natural creativity and biological perspective. Modern humans, when they learned the truth about their ancestors and their relationship to the, reacted with characteristic human adaptability. Some were awed to discover their connection to galactic gods. Others were proud that their ancestors had achieved such heights of wisdom and sacrifice. Most importantly, humans brought something to the partnership that the energy-based had forgotten: the perspective of mortality. Humans still aged and died, still faced limitations and challenges. Their biological nature gave them insights into growth, change, and meaning that immortal energy beings had lost touch with. Dr. Sarah, descendant of the original architect leader, became the first human ambassador to the conclave. Standing before beings who could reshape reality with a thought, she spoke words that echoed across 50 million years. Our ancestors created you because they loved the idea of beings who could grow and wonder forever. Now we can grow and wonder together, teaching each other what we've learned about the universe and our place in it. The partnership transformed both species. Humans developed incredible technologies while maintaining their biological wisdom about mortality and meaning. They rediscovered the joy of discovery through their interactions with humanity's natural curiosity and creativity. Together, they began a new phase of galactic exploration, not as conquerors or uplifters of primitive species, but as partners seeking to understand the deepest mysteries of existence. They seeded new civilizations throughout the universe, sharing the wisdom they had gained about the proper balance between power and purpose. The cycle that had begun 50 million years ago with humanity's sacrifice was finally complete. The architects had created children who could grow beyond their limitations, and now those children were helping their parents rediscover what it meant to be truly alive in an infinite universe. In the end, both species learned the most important lesson of all, that true transcendence isn't about gaining power over the universe, but about finding your place within it and using your abilities to nurture growth rather than dominance. Power without purpose was emptiness, but power combined with wisdom and love could light the way to wonders beyond imagination. The galaxy had finally found its true gods, not beings of unlimited power, but beings of unlimited compassion who understood that the greatest achievement was not what you could create for yourself, but what you could help others become.